We are witnessing a younger gamer in his natural habitat, the PC. As he plays, he experiences an intense emotion known to all as rage.
We may turn to video games for a variety of psychological-based reasons, namely intrinsic motivation and wishful identification. They may serve needs for entertainment, connecting to others, autonomy, and feeling good about ourselves and our skills. Exploring worlds and adventures unavailable in the real world allows us to do and be things we cannot in real life. We may identify with certain characters or aspire to be like them. Because of this, we feel deep and sometimes intense emotions when playing video games. These emotions influence our behavior and our personality.
Over the past few decades, video gaming has become more than just an industry. It has become a lifestyle. Video games have not only seen praise and positivity, but also many negative stories, addressing addictions and violence. It is important to talk about the misconceptions, but also equally important to accept the downsides and hold ourselves accountable. I first want to address these misconceptions. People think that games will drastically affect the way people who play with them interact with others. They think that gamers aren't well adjusted socially. Another holdout from a different era is the idea that gamers are socially isolated and tend to stick to themselves. One only needs to look at the games being released to see how that image isn't accurate. Multiplayer games have been on the rise for years, with many people only playing games when they can share them with their friends. Some of the most popular games in the world are completely multiplayer experiences and require cooperation and communication with other gamers. There isn't really room for the idea that gamers are all loners anymore. It just doesn't hold any grain of truth when you examine the video game landscape. People use many different platforms to communicate, most popularly Discord, along with Skype and TeamSpeak. Another common misconception is that only people who never grew up play video games. A strange bit of double standards that video games have to deal with is that people think that video games are too violent. Yet video games are also something designed only for little children. It doesn't really make sense when you think about it. There are plenty of video games that children shouldn't play because of the subject matter or content within it. So, how do video games also have a reputation as something only children do? The average age of someone who plays video games regularly is much older than it was back when they were first created. People all over the age spectrum play video games now. They aren't just for children anymore. In fact, video games are a good way to reduce stress. One of the reasons we enjoy playing video games is that gaming induces pleasure in our brains. When we play a video game and enjoy it, our brain releases dopamine into the nucleus accumbens, the brain's pleasure center. When this dopamine release happens, we feel good and euphoric, which helps us cope with the stresses of the day. Enjoyment from dopamine is not the only reason for stress relief from video games. There is a psychological pattern in our brain called the triumph circuit, which rewards engagement. Our brain is wired to make us feel good when we overcome challenges. Video games have hacked this circuit. They present us with a challenge and the tools to overcome it. When we succeed, the feelings of satisfaction and competence are positive emotions that help counteract stress.
Lastly, one of the biggest misconceptions and also one of the most important topics for today's video is that violent video games do not cause violent behavior. This is an actively harmful misconception that some people still hold to this day. No, violent video games do not make people more violent in real life. Violent video games are no different than watching a violent or gory movie. Multiple peer-reviewed studies over years of research prove that playing violent video games has little to no bearing on someone being violent in real life. This was a hot-button topic for a long time, certainly when video games started to become more widespread. This may be a misconception that will take a while to go away, but the evidence shows there's no real correlation. Whitney DeCamp, an associate professor of sociology at Western Michigan University, says the evidence points to either no relationship between playing video games and violent behavior or an insignificant link between the two. Sure, he said, some studies have revealed a connection between kids playing violent video games and violent behavior, but there is a problem with looking at those two things in a vacuum. Kids who like to play brutal video games may have a predisposition toward aggression, he said. The real question, he said, does playing violent games cause a person to act violently? In his own study, he examined that question using data from the 2008 Delaware School Survey, which included responses from 6,567 eighth graders. Among the questions, students were asked whether they had played violent video games in the past year. DeCamp factored out the propensity to play violent video games due to a natural attraction to brutality, along with other factors such as gender and family relations. He discovered that playing video games, no matter how bloody, did not predict violent behavior. Christopher Ferguson, associate professor and co-chairman of the Department of Psychology at Stetson University, supports this view. In fact, he goes so far as to suggest that violent video games may help reduce societal violence rather than increase it. Basically, by keeping young males busy with things they like. And this would include everything from playing sports and collecting stamps to playing first-person shooter video games. You keep them off the streets and out of trouble, he said. He added that newer studies with better methods have typically failed to find much evidence of a connection between brutal games and even minor aggressive acts, let alone violence. Persuasive evidence comes from an economic study published in February 2016, which looked at violent criminal offenses in the weeks after the release of popular video games. Tracking both sales and crime rates, the authors discovered that general societal violence decreased in the weeks after the appearance of a new edition of a popular title. Obviously, this does not rule out longer-term effects, the authors admit. Still, they make a bid for the games offering cathartic effects, allowing players to safely release their aggression. Video games can also change social norms by introducing new ideas and concepts to young people. For example, video games that feature diverse characters and storylines can help break down stereotypes and promote acceptance of different cultures and backgrounds. Additionally, video games can also shape social norms by reinforcing certain behaviors. For example, games that reward players for teamwork and cooperation can help promote those values in real life. Video games can also have an impact on attention span and patterns of activity. Studies have shown that playing video games for extended periods of time can lead to decreased attention span and difficulty focusing on tasks that require sustained effort. However, video games can also have positive effects on patterns of activity. Games that require strategic thinking and problem solving can help improve cognitive function and decision-making skills. It's also worth noting that playing video games for extended periods of time can lead to addiction and have negative effects on mental health. Video game addiction is a real condition that can lead to social isolation, depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems. Moreover, video game addiction can be a form of escape from real-world problems or stressors. Children and teens who may be struggling with issues such as bullying, family problems, or academic pressure may turn to video games as a way to cope and distract themselves from their problems. As stated earlier, video games do help reduce stress, but when one becomes solely reliant on this method of escape is when a good thing becomes bad. To recap, video games can have positive effects on mental health. Studies have shown that playing video games can improve mood, reduce stress and anxiety, and promote relaxation. Certain video games, such as puzzle games, can also help improve cognitive function, problem solving, and memory. Additionally, video games can provide a social outlet for individuals who may struggle with social anxiety or have difficulty making friends. Multiplayer games allow individuals to connect with other players from all around the world, providing a sense of community and social interaction. Video games are available for all ages and has shown increased stimuli in the brains of the elderly. Lastly, violent video games do not encourage violent behavior. In fact, the opposite is true, as it allows people to release aggression in a safe and contained way. It's important to remember that while video games can and do impact a person's behavior, other factors such as family environment, peer pressure, and exposure to violence in real life can also play a role in how a person acts.